There is a specific weight to state paperwork, a physical permanence when ink meets paper, turning a person into a file. In Berlin in the mid-1930s, inside quiet rooms like this, clerks sat at desks. Names were copied, dates recorded, categories assigned. The work was routine, yet this exact administrative machinery, forms, folders, and filing cabinets, would soon decide who belonged in society and who did not. Every modern state relies on these tools. Conducting a census, collecting taxes, and registering births are standard, necessary functions of government. But when the German state was reorganized under a new ideological framework, these standard functions were repurposed. The filing system became a mechanism for targeting. Mass exclusion rarely starts with physical force. It starts with classification. Shortly after Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, the state initiated a rapid sweep of its institutions. Laws were drafted to overhaul education, the legal system, and the civil service. The earliest major legislative mechanism for this was the April 1933 law for the restoration of the professional civil service. The law dictated the immediate removal of individuals categorized as non-Aryan from all government positions. To the public, these initial purges were not framed as acts of extremism. They were presented in official language as standard administrative adjustments. This established the operational pattern for the years to follow. Define the category first, execute the exclusion second. By 1935, this categorization was formalized into state law with the passage of the Nuremberg Laws. Biological racism was now codified. The Reich citizenship law split the population into two distinct legal tiers. One group was recognized as citizens with political rights, the other reduced to subjects with none. The state needed a mathematical factor to determine this split. They traced lineage back to 4 grandparents to calculate legal status. Bureaucrats relied heavily on old paper trails, digging through birth records and religious registries to resolve ambiguous cases. A companion statute, the Law for the Protection of German Blood and Honor, then used these precise categories to restrict private relationships and marriages. The strict process of consulting archives and filling out forms gave arbitrary ideological prejudice a heavy coat of objective, scientific certainty. Writing those laws was one thing. Enforcing them across millions of people required an enormous supply of hard demographic data. The state engineered the 1939 national census to meet this demand, designing it to capture detailed religious affiliation and lineage information on a mass scale. This new census data was cross-referenced with local municipal archives and church documents, pulling regional records into a highly organized, centralized structure. The scale was staggering, processing millions of individual files through manual cross-checking, stamping, and organizing. People were simply filling out forms for their government, but that routine compliance was building a registry of targets. Without this comprehensive, carefully cross-referenced data substrate, the physical targeting that followed would have been logistically impossible. There was friction inside the bureaucracy. Some officials pointed out glaring inconsistencies in the rules for classifying individuals with mixed ancestry, but the institution actively discouraged resistance. Career advancement required strict compliance, so clerks learned to resolve any ambiguity by applying the harshest possible interpretation.
Over time, administrative language shifted. Bureaucrats adopted new terminology that normalized treating certain populations as separate and unequal on state paperwork. Following the annexation of Austria in March 1938, the state expanded these identification systems outward into new territories. Identification documents were rigidly standardized. By October 1938, Jewish individuals were mandated to carry passports marked with a J and forced to adopt supplementary names. Officials justified these mandates as necessary for administrative clarity. In practice, they engineered tools for hypervisibility and total control. The system then transitioned from passive categorization into active physical restriction. The state banned targeted populations from owning businesses, accessing public spaces, and attending specific schools. Each restriction relied entirely on the paperwork. To deny a business license or school enrollment, the clerk needed to see a prior registry entry or a specific categorization stamp. This created a cycle. Initial categorization enabled the restriction of rights. Enforcing those restrictions generated even more precise demographic data, which the state then absorbed. The bureaucratic structure became a self-reinforcing engine. The more demographic data the state collected, the more precise and severe its exclusions became. In January 1942, senior officials gathered in Berlin for the Wannsee Conference. The room looked like a corporate board meeting. Men sat around a long table, consulting files and reviewing statistics. This meeting did not invent the policy of exclusion. Instead, it served as a massive logistical coordination effort to expand the system across occupied Europe. The officials spoke in strictly sanitized language. They masked mass deportations with administrative terms like evacuation and resettlement. In that room, the foundational framework of local registries and census forms was successfully scaled into a synchronized continent-wide machine. Executing this final phase required a vast paper trail to organize mass deportations, demanded precise train timetables, detailed property inventories, and strict population quotas. This document is a transport list from the Yad Vashem archives. It demonstrates the exact reliance on granular data, tracking targeted individuals by their typed, alphabetized names and ID numbers to load them onto transports. Between 1941 and 1945, this paperwork dictated the physical reality on the ground. Millions of targeted individuals were systematically removed from various European regions. According to documented figures, approximately 6 million Jewish individuals, alongside millions of others targeted by the regime, were systematically murdered. The sheer scale of this violence was physically impossible to execute without the decades of meticulous administrative data collection that preceded it. Ideology provided the lethal intent, but it was the deeply entrenched systematic logic of the bureaucracy that gave it sheer force and scale. State record-keeping and classification are essential functions of modern society. That makes them uniquely vulnerable to catastrophic redirection when oversight weakens and institutional safeguards fail. The most extreme outcomes in history rarely arrive at once. They take shape gradually, driven by the steady accumulation of ordinary, routine paperwork.